All right, hey guys, welcome back to the Chat and All Movie Hour. We are so excited to finally be bringing you the next saga. We are doing the Nightmare on Elm Street canon, pretty much from start to finish. And of course, we are representing the man of my dreams, pun intended. And yeah, this has been a long time coming, and I'm so effing stoked to be doing a Nightmare on Elm Street movie hour. So cheers to you and to Chad and to Freddy and to to all of it. Here we go.
You gotta show them your shirt too, because it is badass.
Freddy tarot card, the dreamer moment.
Yes. That swagger.
Okay. So I will let Chad, with his infinite expertise on the franchise, kind of maybe start us off on some of the key players and just introduce the masterpiece that is Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Sure. Well, first off, I have some show and tell, which I can get kind of ready. So first off, I have, which you already saw, the glove, which this is more like a metal, not safe for work glove, I guess.
Okay.
A lot of them that you pick up have, this is like an official glove that NECA made, which is like really accurate to the film. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. It's pretty accurate. And it's metal. It's not sharpened, of course, but it's metal, whereas a lot of them are, of course, plastic, which I can't. No, don't get me started. But so this is my glove that I own.
It's beautiful. I'm very jealous.
And then I'll just show a few things that we'll be discussing. Well, first of all, the NECA also put out this amazing, I think 30th anniversary toy of Krueger with the human face masks he has.
Okay.
The face where he rips off the skin from his face and you see like a skull underneath.
Love it.
The phone with the tongue that comes out of it. And just another face.
All of Christmas is that phone.
This one is great, and I have a copy of it that I just have out too, but this one I keep like sealed or whatever. And then we're going to be discussing this episode called No More Mr. Nice Guy, which is one of the Freddy Nightmares. Yes, there's a TV series, Freddy's Nightmares, and we're going to discuss No More Mr. Nice Guy because this episode takes you through his back history, his backstory, which kind of leads up to the film that we're discussing now. And we're going to discuss Never Sleep Again a little bit, which is an amazing documentary, extended documentary on Nightmare on Elm Street, 4-hour doc, and there's like extended scenes too, even on this, so it's like even longer than that. And then this is the documentary that Heather Langenkamp made called I Am Nancy, that I just met her for the first time, and she was like one of the people I've always wanted to meet in my life. So I just met her last year for the first time, and she signed this for me, and I got this in Texas at Frightmare Weekend. So amazing. That's my show and tell for this. I actually will have a lot of show and tell for Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, which is your favorite one, right? So we'll have a lot to discuss because
for me,
Nightmare on Elm Street 2 stuff, like including a quarter scale doll of him, which is my favorite thing I own of Nightmare, but I didn't show it on this one because it's technically Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. So we'll get into that. But
you have to subscribe, you have to like, you have to watch, and you have to stay tuned for the next movie hour or you won't get to see it. That's how this works, folks.
Truths named. So, what? I mean, gosh, there's so much to say, but what can be said about this film that hasn't been said? It's such an iconic film. It's a part of our childhoods, right? And another somewhat perfect storm type situation where you
Yeah.
have a really good director, Wes Craven, who was in his prime, and perfect casting for Freddy Krueger. This was perfect casting. This type of casting comes along like once a decade, maybe, where the person playing it is as important as the character. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't. They even tried to film stuff without him for like sequels. I think for the second one they started with someone else, not him, because they didn't want to pay him just whatever meager thing he asked for.
Right.
And like, shame on them because they noticed right away that his acting is everything, even though he's behind all that latex. It's Robert.
There was only one Robert Englund.
Yes, and he is an incredible actor, and he's what makes Freddy. So you can't have Freddy without Robert Englund,
No.
who I've gotten a chance to meet too, and he's just the awesomest guy. But
So jealous.
so what? Let's just dive right into it. So
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven, produced by Robert Shaye. This was like you saw in the 4-hour documentary Never Sleep Again that this film is what made New Line Cinema. Like without this film, there would be no New Line Cinema, which went on to do Lord of the Rings and a bunch of stuff. Obviously, I love New Line Cinema, but Robert Shaye, who was like the head of that, really worked with Wes Craven on this film, even though it's more Wes Craven's film. But Bob Shaye did a lot of stuff for it, and he's just kind of this weird, interesting guy. You have Johnny Depp appearing for the first time ever in a film. I think he had been on TV but not film, and so like it's just delicious and interesting to see him like in the crop top and stuff. And he's like,
it's in my notes.
Yeah, he's not.
I have notes on the crop top.
Oh yes, I'm sure. And then, so this film was released in 1984, November 9th. Yeah, it was made for 1.8 million and it made 57 million dollars. So yeah, they immediately wanted to do a sequel, and originally it was just meant to be this one dark film. And of course the sequels have a totally different tone, which we'll talk about when we get to the sequels. But this film is a darker film, and I love when Wes Craven was talking about in the documentary Never Sleep Again and multiple behind the scenes interviews, he discusses a series of articles that were in the newspaper that sparked his imagination for writing this film. So you don't hear these stories anymore with film either, and I hate to keep being the one that's like, film and music aren't as good as they used to be, but they're not. And one thing is like this, there's so much like truth and inspiration in the roots of this film that you really don't hear people have anymore. And it's because there was this series of real articles in the newspaper that were really under the radar from the mainstream. They weren't like front page news or anything. And Wes Craven was sort of like paying attention to them as just a person that's interested in these strange and unusual things. And they tell very much the story of someone who's like a teenager and afraid to sleep and keeping coffee in their closet, and then the adults not taking him seriously, and then the parents rushing in to find him like dead after like a night terror. So that's such an interesting, cool story. And when I was a kid, like that lit my imagination on fire too, like someone haunting in your dream. And it's so creative too, because in the dreamscape, like you can come up with any idea you can imagine, you could come up with to put on film. So it's like Jason, where you can't really get that creative other than the types of kills. With Freddy, it's so much more creative because you can get surreal, like how dreams are.
Yes.
He's my favorite slasher of all the slasher films. I love Friday the 13th, but this by far I think is so much better and is just the best one. It's my favorite at least. And so we also talked recently about the knockoff version of it that's like a Bollywood version. So it's called The Monster, and if you haven't seen it, you can watch it on YouTube. for free, and it's just like hilarious. But it's just really wild and so culturally different that it's fascinating to watch. But it's called Mahakaal, or The Monster in English. But it's like a Hindi film, and it's kind of a comedy horror, but it follows closely Nightmare on Elm Street. It's really interesting to see because you feel like you fell through into an alternate reality. You're just
I'm sure.
like a totally different version of it.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, if you want, let's talk about Freddy's Nightmare episode 1, No More Mr. Nice Guy, before we get into the heart of the film, since that's the backstory.
Yeah, can I just say though, like the fact that the plot was based on true events was something that I always knew, but it wasn't until I watched Never Sleep Again, the documentary, where I learned just like how much this particular true story of this young boy who died in his sleep, how much that informs the movie. I mean, even to the point, like you said, like where Wes Craven read that, you know, he had a Mr. Coffee machine hidden in his closet, plugged in so his parents couldn't see it. He was so scared. I mean, just to imagine that. Like,
right.
He was so scared to go to sleep, and his parents kept dosing him with sleeping pills, but he was hiding them. And they didn't discover that until they found him dead after he finally went to sleep. And it was so interesting to hear Wes Craven ask the question, like, what was he so scared of? Like, what was it that actually killed him in the dream world? And then to have this narrative be birthed from that, it's just extraordinary. And also New Line Cinema, like the logo, well, learning about the New Line Cinema, like how it came to be as a production company, was really fascinating. But the logo of New Line Cinema, where it's like the two kind of film strips that kind of come into frame, and the music that plays, like every time New Line Cinema logos come on the screen, I am immediately like time machined back to being a kid. And I associate that logo with horror movies because it's creepy. And yeah, I mean, it clearly was associated with a lot of slasher films, but yeah, it just amazing.
A very slasher look, and it was bright red, and then it became more of like a blue, the film strips that are blue that kind of come together, right, which I always think of In the Mouth of Madness, because that's a New Line Cinema film too, and I always think of the logo at the start of that film.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Freddy's Nightmare.
Yeah, so in No More Mr. Nice Guy, episode 1 of Freddy's Nightmares, this TV series is very hit or miss. Like, I'm not going to say it's good, but this particular episode I think is really good, especially for TV produced at that time. And it's clear that they were going for like an MTV vibe or whatever, and trying to get like a younger market with like bright colors and like a lot of sound effects and stuff. But there's definitely like something called MTV like lighting then, where it's like you have a lot of like bright colors and everything's oversaturated, and the contrast and everything like very music video-y, everything's like cranked up. And they very much did that in this. But I thought the way they handled his backstory was so good, and I always just thought like one day we'd see that on the big screen. And like when they did that stupid remake that they did, which we were all excited for because the actor that plays him was like a pretty good cast choice, but they didn't go into this backstory that this episode does. And I feel like that was such a major miss for that film, because they could have like started with the backstory with him like not in the makeup, and then like really cranked it up when we like go into like after his death. Like it could have been split right down the middle.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. So this episode is that whole story up to when the first film started. So Robert Englund is in this series too, of course. He always plays Freddy and has spent so many hours with playing this character, I'm sure. But he is great without like the burn makeup. He's just as good. And the way they frame him is awesome, because you never see him like just plain, like it's always an over the shoulder or shadowed, and like it keeps the mystery, which is awesome. It starts off like right after his like him wreaking havoc on this town by presumably molesting and murdering a bunch of young children, right? Which is terrible. So they never name it like fully like what he's done, but it's just left to the imagination that it's really horrible. And so it starts off with his trial, like him on trial for it, and him getting off on a technicality, which is ultimate, like outrage of injustice, right? Because this person is finally going to be held accountable. They're being tried, and the law is so just and fair, and people are going to get, he's going to get what he deserves. And of course, the way they describe it is a little flimsy, in my opinion, because they say that the cop forgot to read him his rights, but who was really there to verify? The cop could just say, no, he's lying, I did read him his rights.
Right.
Be the end.
It's a 45-minute episode. They had to get things.
Anyway, moving right along. So he gets off, and they form a mob mentality and a literal mob, lynch mob, almost right away. What's great is that like he leaves through the courthouse, but then, and everyone's in hysteria, and they're all like shouting at each other. The acting's, okay. But then when they leave, like after him to like see him on the street as he has already left, he's not there, which is awesome. Right. Which is so great. He's so mysterious, even as like a human character.
I know.
Not human, even as a human, but you know what I mean. And so they track him down and they torch him, which is described in A Nightmare on Elm Street, but now we're seeing it in this TV episode. And it's a great scene. Like you see him go up in flames and everything. The stunt work is really good. And then there's a lot of signs that he's come back, They actually take his body, the sheriff or whoever takes his body, and the guy who stars in this episode, I think, is really good, actually. The sheriff, he's pretty good in it. Yeah, definitely. And he is told by like a fellow cop that the FBI is coming to town, and to hold Freddy accountable. And the story is really good, actually. And they take Freddy, and he tells them to take Freddy and bury him because he's already killed him, and hide the body, basically. So they go to this like junkyard. I think they call it something else, but it's basically like a junkyard. And he welds Freddy's body into the trunk of a car, like a wrecked car. So cool. So, but then
not gonna go well with Fred.
No. So then it's like he's already coming back in a supernatural way. And they go back to the trunk of the car and they open it up, and there's just a bunch of claw marks, and he's not in there anymore. And he slowly starts to become the Freddy we know. So it's a great episode, and we'll link it down below because it's on Daily Motion.
Yeah. It's
too hot for YouTube, but it's on Daily.
Too hot for YouTube, yeah. It's incredible because I have like very vivid memories of watching the show Freddy's Nightmares when I was a kid, and we talked about this in previous movie hours. I was fortunate enough to have a mom that didn't censor what I watched, so she would take me to see these movies. And I remember like my friends wouldn't be able to watch them, but because Freddy's Nightmares was made for TV, I was able to watch a lot of those episodes with friends. And I some of them, like to your point, it's hit or miss. Like some of them were such crap and so cheesy, but the origin, like every anti-hero deserves his origin story, and Freddy gets it in No More Mr. Nice Guy, the first like the premiere pilot episode of this series, and it's actually a damn good like hour of TV, all things considered. And even from the opening scene, the thing that I like had completely forgotten about was like it starts out with the news anchor reading the news about like these kids that had been brutalized and murdered, and how they had apprehended Fred Krueger, and then all of a sudden you see like the news anchor's face kind of dissolve and fade away, and then it cuts to like when your TV goes out or used to go out, antenna went bad. it's like the green and red stripes.
Yes.
And all of a sudden the news anchor is like transported in front of the courthouse, but he's gone through some sort of a threshold because he's like, where am I? So you don't know if you're in the real world, the dream world, or what's going on. But he continues to read, what's going on, and then it cuts to the courthouse, and you have like, for all intents and purposes, like a pretty serious like episode of television. Yeah. But I love how they, like you mentioned, they obscure Freddy's human, because he's still human at this point, and he's sitting in like this box, like this case inside of the courthouse. Say again?
Very much like Hannibal Lecter, I thought.
I was just gonna say, yeah. So like it, but what was so epic about it is he's sitting there and he's wearing his green and red sweater and his dirty brown pants, and you can't see his face, but you can see him sitting there, and you could tell he's just like doesn't give any fucks, and he's got his hat. What an amazing like choice in writing. Like he's sitting in the box at his trial, and he's just kind of like spinning his hat. It's just so good. And then, I love how the episode also breaks the fourth wall, because Freddy is both narrator of the episodes and like letting you, like this is my origin story, essentially. I mean, it's so good. He's so sexy in this episode.
Yes, and it works on different levels. Yeah. It's almost like when they started the TV show, they're like, we're gonna really do this right, and then it just like quickly fell to shit. But they were they were like different people direct different ones.
Yeah.
And I'm just double checking this. Yes. So this first episode, this is gonna blow your mind. Are you ready?
This is what?
This first episode was directed by Tobe Hooper, who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I saw that, yeah.
So amazing.
Like, so, what more do you want? What do you want from us? Giving you all of the truths.
So if we're gonna say why some episodes are better than others, I think it comes down to like every episode had like a different director, which is kind of cool. So this one with Tobe Hooper, I mean, I think a lot of Tobe Hooper fans don't think about this as part of his like body of work, and I think it should, because it's so cool. I mean, it's the only chance we're really gonna get to get that origin story, at least with Englund, done somewhat right. So
and you see, you like, much to your point, like when they redid Nightmare on Elm Street with Jackie Earle Haley, like we all had such high hopes for that remake because of that casting, and it just was a missed opportunity. But with this, cheesy late 80s, early 90s, when did the show even come out? Like you have this origin story that you get to see, like the first time the parents are like go full vigilante and take matters into their own hands and say, like, we're not going to let this child molester murderer continue to run wild. And then you see them set him on fire, and he goes from Fred Krueger to Freddy. And like my favorite part of the episode is that Freddy like breaks the fourth wall like 3 or 4 times and talks to the audience and is like, that was then, this is now. He's cracking jokes. And at the final scene of the episode, like after he basically murders the main character, the cop, Tim, he, is like, who's next? And he's walking around his like boiler room, basement, whatever, with all his like murder toys. And he's like, who's next? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? And then he looks at the camera and he's like, or is it one of you guys? And I was just like, me home. Daddy, take you.
Yes. So
good.
Because in the first film, Robert Englund and Freddy had a much darker tone, and then in every subsequent film, he became more of that horror icon that's more ironic and has that wink in the eye. And in this series, since it came out in 91, starting in 91, he was able to kind of shift back and forth between those. So in episode, you get a sense of both. Like you get that Freddy from the origin from that first film, but then it's also peppered in that more like geez, how would you say it, like I guess iconic Freddy, because that's a word we're overusing. But what I mean is like more the zeitgeist Freddy, right? The Freddy
Right.
that's more the cultural
Right.
entity, right? That people like is on the pinball machine and on the TV commercials and doing television segments. It's more the pop culture Freddy.
Right. The Freddy that cracks really bad jokes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love it. But let's get into the film itself.
All right, take us there.
So
I have copious notes. Copious notes.
If you want to start by just taking us through like your childhood memories of it, and all these films, of course, go back to me renting with VHS. Like we talk about that all the time, that we used to rent these films on VHS as kids. But what were some of your early impressions of this film?
So I was 2 years old when it came out, so I don't know if maybe my mom ever took me to the theater to see it because she wanted to see it, but I certainly don't remember it having seen it in the theater. But I grew up watching Nightmare on Elm Street, the entire franchise. Number 2 is my favorite. Spoiler alert, stay tuned. But it's my favorite slasher of the big three of Michael Myers, Jason, Voorhees. Freddy Krueger is like the love of my life. I just think this franchise is Wes Craven's a genius. But anyways, I'm going off on a tangent. Some of my earliest memories are of just that, like having the VHS or it coming on television and watching it in my room, and the Freddy Krueger phone with the tongue is like a very visceral like childhood memory.
Oh my God, real quick. In the documentary, when they say that, when the guy says, like, we weren't sure why Heather Langenkamp wanted to take that tongue phone with her home so bad. She wanted to take the prop home, and I don't know what he was implying, but that was hilarious.
I don't know, but I feel Heather Langenkamp. I would have taken the tongue phone home too, okay? If you know, now you know what to get me for Christmas, okay? So I just, like, of course, the imagery of Johnny Depp in his crop top football, like, jersey, that's implanted in my head. And also what's implanted in my head very viscerally is just the imagery of Tina being dragged across the ceiling. And also when Freddy comes through the wall and you just see, like, the stretchy type situation.
So good.
Like, those are time machine moments. Like, when I see it, I'm a kid again. I mean, there's so many, but I love the movie, and when I rewatched it specifically to prep for this, like, the movie felt so short. It went by so fast.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, just nothing but good memories. And I remember buying when the DVD box set of all 6 films and New Nightmare came out with 3D glasses for episode 6.
Yeah.
Like, that was everything. So yeah, all day.
That I need to bring it for our next movie hour, but I have that same set autographed by Robert Englund. Yeah. So good. Yeah, but when I was listening to you describe like certain moments, there's such like ultimate 80s moments. Like, they're very stylized, but what's great is, like, with Wes at the helm, he was I would consider him an intellectual and as a person, whereas maybe some of the other slasher film directors not as much. So I think that he cerebralized the art form in this film a lot. I mean, you definitely have like your typical slasher moments, but it all feels elevated a little bit because of that, and so hats off to him for that. I think that's really fun.
You learn in the Never Sleep Again documentary that he was a teacher, so he's clearly coming at this from a different, and he even says in the documentary, or somebody says it of him, that, like, because Friday the 13th had already come out before Nightmare on Elm Street, and they were like, we didn't just when you have a traditional slasher film, the only way to change it up is just to change the kills. And we wanted to do something different, and they totally did. And to your point, that's because Wes Craven is an intellectual, like 100%.
Yes, and I love Tina's death scene because, which happens fairly early in the film. So fairly early in the film, you get a sequence with a level of quality that would usually be reserved for like your final big end sequence, and it's just in the beginning of this film. They created an entire room that rotated on an axis, where they could completely manipulate your idea of reality for the sequence and have her slide up the wall and onto the ceiling, and it still holds up today. Like it's so well done. And they talk about how like Fred Astaire, they had used this for like some Fred Astaire film, particularly Royal Wedding, way back, decades prior. And I love Fred Astaire so much. But so I think that's like so cool, because you wouldn't picture like from like a musical like that they would like gleam something that they could really take advantage of, and they did. And just like things like that are so genius. Like that's genius. And the sequence itself is just incredible, of her death scene. And there's just so many great scenes like that in this film.
Yeah, and early on in the documentary, Robert Englund, because he wasn't their first choice, which I was today years old when I learned. There was another actor, and you'll have to forgive me, I don't know his name, that sorry, who was it?
David Warner, who he was in The Omen. He was in, oh gosh, like, you know him. He's one of those actors everyone knows, but we just don't maybe know his name. But like, he's been in a ton of stuff, and they show a picture in the documentary of him in the makeup even, and it's so like alternate reality moment of like, oh gosh, it could have been this, like it could have been totally different, and it's actually not bad. Like I could see him in it. No one is Robert Englund though, of course. I mean, that goes without saying, but it's not the worst like alternate.
Right, they could have done worse, yeah. And he like only fell out because he had like a scheduling conflict, and then they bring in Daddy, and Daddy was talking, because you're mentioning the Fred Astaire reference, which you very much get with Freddy in the Hat, even just like, the jazz hand, like there's a lot of this moment going on. But Robert Englund in the documentary speaks to the fact that he used a lot of Jimmy Cagney, like was trying to channel a little bit of Cagney to give Freddy his swag. And I mean, thank you, Jimmy Cagney, I guess. Like, blessings. We're very grateful. I don't know.
Know what an amazing actor Robert Englund is, because as an actor, you really have to be such a skilled performer to have the ability to curate a character based on so many well-selected references, right? And it's like a stew of ingredients that you have to taste and get just right. And he just did that so well with this character.
And with your earlier point about how this movie also seemed to be like a perfect storm of like right people, right time, happy accidents, like Robert Englund in the documentary, which I had totally forgotten about, the show V that he was on. He was already like famous, but most people don't ever think of Robert Englund outside of Freddy Krueger, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but his portfolio is quite long. But Robert Englund is a highly intelligent person as well. And when you hear him speak about how even back then, how aware he was, and seemingly even Heather Langenkamp, as young as she was, like everyone seemed to be very aware that they were doing something different with the genre. And I mean, Robert Englund, talks about the universality. I mean, if we just want to dip our toes in the mythology of it all, he is deeply aware of, and obviously Wes Craven was too, of the, what the the nightmare trope, the bad dream trope, and the boogeyman trope, how universal they are and how they would impact the zeitgeist. And somebody documentary, I don't know if it was Lin Shaye, who is Magda from Something About Mary, but she's the teacher in Nightmare on Elm Street and also the sister of Bob Shaye, who founded New Line Cinema. I think it was her that said, oh God, what did she say?
I just have to say, I just recently rewatched Insidious, and she's so incredible. Wow.
Yeah, I remember when you messaged that to me. Yeah, she's an amazing actress. I think it was her that said, or maybe it was somebody else, but they said Nightmare did for horror what Jaws did for the ocean. Like Jaws made you scared to go into the ocean, Freddy made you scared to go to sleep, and it's true. Like and that is a testament to, I think, Wes and Robert, really. I mean, more than anything else.
Yeah. And I just want to preach like Heather Langenkamp, because this is a person that was like a huge part of my life. And I, for whatever reason, because I go to horror cons quite often, but I had never been to one that she was at. So I had never had a chance to meet her. So I kind of went out of my way to meet her last year at the horror convention that I mentioned, Texas Frightmare, and she was so everything you would want her to be, which I imagine is difficult to be, meeting like thousands of people at a time, to just constantly be like so gracious and so like happy and so interested in the other person. That's gotta like exhaust your spirit after like meeting thousands of people, which you have to do. Same with Rob Englund. Both of them are so incredible every time you meet them. And but Heather, for me, like I had always just had like such strong love for her as an actress through these films. And so I really, really was on my bucket list to meet her, and it did not disappoint. And she's incredible. But I think she's incredible in these films. And if you just take like the first film, the third film, and New Nightmare, which I think is the seventh film, there's this amazing character arc with her where you see her as a kid, essentially. And then in the third film, you see her as an adult woman. Then in New Nightmare, of course, you see her as herself in a way, which is like so. And she's so gorgeous in that final film too. She like really comes into her beauty. But I'm just in love with her. That's all I have to say.
I'm so glad you got to meet her. I'm very jealous. I have to say I'm more so jealous that you've met Robert. But yeah, she's extraordinary. And when you see New Nightmare, I think it holds up to this day. And like you can just, what an underutilized actress, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know how old she was when she filmed Nightmare, but she's playing a 15-year-old. Obviously, she was much older than that, or at least a few years older than that. But
right, there's that great. Oh, I have something to say. It's not even funny. There's that great line in the film, in the first film, where she says, "God, I look 20 years old," and like I've seen it with an audience, in re-showings, and I always laugh at that scene, and I'm not sure why, because she actually does look very young in this film, but clearly she's playing younger.
Right.
It's a myth, but at the same time, it's just a hilarious line.
It is. It was in my notes. It's like, really, you think that's old? Okay, we have some problems. We need to have a conversation.
Yes, and kids always think like 20 is so old. It's just so funny. That's a good probably that.
And I really loved how in the documentary, Wes Craven talks about casting her, and he said he specifically, what did he say? I wanted a heroine who didn't trip and fall down, that could fight back. And my God, like she set the precedent for that, because all the other slasher movies, even before and since, tend to follow the horror movie formula. And that's why I think Scream is so brilliant, is because Wes Craven came full circle and made a commentary on all of the tropes. But she was capable. She fought back. She and Robert Englund then says that he believed Freddy saw Nancy as a worthy adversary, and she absolutely fucking was. Like, they go tit for tat, and the fact that she's like the one that got away from him, like he can't ever quite get her, is just such a delicious relationship and dynamic between the two of them.
Right. So I have a few things to say. So she was born in 1964. The movie came out in 1984. So she was exactly 20 when they filmed it, which is
Okay.
Is that line, God, I look 20. So that line is funny on multiple levels. But I also, I was thinking when you were just making me think that yes, both Heather Camp and Robert Englund are both super incredible actors that are underutilized. And I could see like Heather in some similar like a Jennifer Connelly like roles almost, like, you know, from like Labyrinth and a more innocent character, and going through
Right.
doing I'm sure she could handle a ton of different roles, but I think this franchise has dwarfed both of them, and for better or worse. And I think that there's a lot of like boxing in that's done of them, where you know, they're thought of as that character, to the point where Heather has done a documentary called I Am Nancy, like exploring that a little bit. But it's awesome because I feel like, from what I can sense through that documentary, I Am Nancy, and from meeting her, she seems so close to, and how well do you ever know anyone? But she seems very close to that altruistic, like, good to his evil.
Right.
Too. I mean,
In real.
he seems like such a sweet, nice person. And there's a great, if anyone has like the DVD of Nightmare, I think on the DVD you can access an extra where they go to the filming locations of Nightmare on Elm Street, and they actually take Heather Langenkamp back to the house on Genesee Avenue.
Oh, I've seen that.
Los Angeles. That's like so sweet in that too, and it's like every time you see her, it's like, gosh, she's just like such a great person. I don't know.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think yeah, I'd be curious to know like why she didn't go mainstream after all of this, or if it was a choice, or she was typecast and now she couldn't get the roles. But she's fantastic, and yeah, I can't say enough good things about her. I truly can't.
It's interesting in the 4-hour documentary Never Sleep Again that we don't get a new interview from Johnny Depp, and I'm sure they reached out to him either through Heather Langenkamp or someone, or New Line, or someone that maybe had like a connection, because he's.
When did it come out? The
Never Sleep Again is like, I'll find out.
Because they do talk about when Johnny Depp was on Inside the Actors Studio, which even that is going back like 12 years. He does talk about James Lipton, may he rest in peace, does ask him about Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a really good bit.
Definitely. And my thoughts on that are that he was cornered, because he agreed to the format, which is so excellent. I love Inside the Actors Studio. It's so great. And you know, he wanted to be a part of that show, which is definitely like a highbrow show.
Right.
And of course it was going to come up at least once. So there's like a sentence or two spoken of it, and then they move on. But this is almost like something slasher that he doesn't want to be associated with. You get a sense, because he doesn't participate in the Never Sleep Again documentary, which is a shame, because virtually everybody else does. And even if he did like a quick little interview, I mean, just do it, Daddy. Just do it. Just do it,
Daddy. And what's so, I just don't understand, like, of all of this, because Johnny Depp, I mean, I love 21 Jump Street. I'm not shading 21 Jump Street. I grew up watching it, but like there's a lot of shit in Johnny Depp's like portfolio that like is a lot worse than the work he did in Nightmare. And if it weren't for Wes and Nightmare, we would not have Johnny Depp. So like why aren't you just paying credit to like the people that helped make you. Like, I don't know, it's a little sidebar, but
Right.
it's funny in the documentary they're interviewing the gentleman who played Rod in Nightmare on Elm Street, the bad boy, you know, and he's talking about how the script had written Johnny Depp's character Johnny as like a jock, and he is the jock, but he talks about how like when Johnny Depp actually got cast, you know, he's like this quiet, sensitive, you know, soft-spoken guy, and you know, then they put him in this crop top jersey so that he's the jock, but really, I mean, it's Johnny Depp, it's crybaby, he's super sensitive. But what was also interesting that I learned in the documentary, which I was upsetting but made perfect sense, was that the actor who played Rod, and forgive me, I don't know his name, is a Latin gentleman, and Latin men were not. What's his name?
His name is Nick Corey.
Okay.
He said he was trying to sound more Italian.
Yeah, because Latin men weren't getting cast, so he played Rod as an Italian to get the role, or yeah, just an interesting tidbit, but also that
but
yeah, and I didn't know that Charlie Sheen was up for the role of Johnny Depp's character, but he wanted $3,000 a week and they couldn't afford it, so they got Johnny Depp instead. And
wise move.
yeah. All right, what else? We got a lot to cover here. What's next?
Well, I think let's talk about the mom in this movie, because she's everything. So Heather Langenkamp, yes.
I just need my bathrobe.
Wait, hold on.
If only it were a bottle of vodka, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, holding it like right here. Because mom knows she done fucked up, okay? Like, first of all, okay, just hang on. I'm having a moment right now. These parents just fucked everything up for their kids, okay? Like, not that the cops were going to get Freddy, but the great thing about the Freddy's Nightmare television show premiere episode is one of the kids says to the parents, you cannot kill Freddy. If you kill Freddy, you're going to make it worse. And what do the parents do? They kill Freddy, and then we have 7 movies where everything is gone to shit. Listen to the kids.
How did the kids know that, though?
Well, one of the blonde twins, the sisters, was like having PTSD, and I think she was like clued into what like Fred's powers were, and she was like, listen, Dad, if you come for him, it's just gonna make it worse. Like, just leave him be.
That's a great. She had like telekinetic or psychic or some kind of additions like that to her personality. So she definitely was tuned into something. She was in a trance, and she even channels Freddy in one of the scenes.
And she sings the song too.
And it's good.
And it's interesting that she sings the song, because we don't hear the song for the first time until Heather Langenkamp as Nancy sings it in the bathtub in Nightmare.
Oh, that's a great point. Well, but we can revise that, because I think the first episode should come before the movie.
Right. I mean, chronologically it makes sense. But anyways, Mom clearly is hitting the bottle, because she knows. And also, why are you keeping his glove in the house? Like, isn't that like keeping him connected to you and drawing him to you? Get rid of the fucking glove.
That's a good. I just love her, like, I love when I love her drunkenness. It's hilarious. And when she puts the bars on all the windows, and Nancy comes in and she's like, Mother, like, what are you doing? And the mom is like, locked. She's like drunk.
She has no more fucks to give. Yeah.
And hitting the bottom.
Whoever plays the mom is a great actress too.
She's awesome. Yeah, she's really good. She's totally believable. She's funny, but she's also believable. She's a good balance. And I love the scene where the daughter becomes the mom and has to put the mom to bed because of the mom's drinking. Like, there's a lot of truth in that too for a lot of people. And just like interesting to explore that too. But I do think she's a great actress, and I love the scene where she takes Nancy down into the basement and pulls the glove out and says, "Honey, he can't come for you because we killed him." Now these are adults that are very much living in reality, and I'm doing air quotes with reality because it's what adults have. And when we were kids when we watched this, so we still had a lot more imagination that you supposedly give up when you become an adult. But these adults had agreed collectively on what reality was, and it did not include someone coming back for you in your dreams. So they like are canceling this out. They're like, "Honey, he's dead. Here's his glove. We killed him." I guess she's like holding on to the evidence, or had hid the evidence, but a good point of why she still has it. But yeah, it's just like the adults telling you this is reality, and maybe they don't really know, right?
Yeah. And it's the documentary very early on speaks to the fact that the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is very much carries on the theme of like the sins of the parents are revisited upon the children, and that's exactly what we see happen. And how like the parents are like gaslighting the kids because the kids are being visited by Freddy and no one will believe them except each other. So the people you would normally not trust, like adolescent youths, are like telling the truth. Meanwhile, the parents are allowing their children to get murdered because they're in complete denial. It's just the themes are so rich, and and speaking of mom, the guy that plays the dad, John Saxon, also a seasoned actor.
He's so great.
He was in the second to last remake of A Star Is Born. He was in Enter the Dragon. He also was back in New Nightmare. Oh.
Yes. And I have to say that he also played a cop in Black Christmas, which, have you seen? Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies.
I was a kid, so I don't remember it, but yeah.
But that is an incredible movie, and we should probably do a movie hour on that at some point because it's such an iconic movie, and he's great in that, and he's great in this, and he said he built a bridge between the two characters, so there's definitely some relation. Yeah, he's awesome in this too. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple more things I want to talk about from the movie itself. Do you have anything that you want to steer us towards that we haven't gotten into yet?
Not really, but take us through your notes, and I'm sure it'll spark a lot.
Well, this is like a fun fact that you learn when you watch the documentary, is that a gentleman by the name of David Miller, who had worked on Michael Jackson's Thriller video, was one of the makeup artists, and he, pun intended, dreamt up the design for Freddy's burn makeup one night when he was eating pizza, and he says that he literally like made with his cheese and pepperonis the face of Freddy, and that melted cheese and pepperoni is Freddy Krueger's face. And I just thought that was awesome. I had no idea like who dreamt up the design, and there it is. Yeah, no, I mean, I think like for me, having rewatched Nightmare specifically to like take notes for this, I was really paying attention, and the score to Nightmare on Elm Street's franchise is, again, dare I say, iconic. Like,
so good.
The score, just, you immediately hear it and you are immediately there, and you know what's coming, you know what's happening. Much like the piano from Halloween, and the from Freddy the 13th. Like, they're all iconic, but to me, like, the scoring to this franchise is absolutely beautiful. The opening sequence when you get to see like Freddy create the glove and you have no idea what's coming, you just see this man making the glove and putting it on, and then cut to, and I wanted to ask your opinion on this because I even pulled up the script for the movie, and it right after it says sheep passes by, it has in parentheses not explained. But when in that opening sequence of Nightmare on Elm Street, when you get like you're going through the boiler room, you see a sheep and it's like bleeding and it's going blah, 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 whatever, and it's just like never explained. And it's like I would assume it's just like a metaphor for like the sacrificial lamb and all the slaughter that's to come. I don't know.
And dream imagery, right? Because in dreams, a lot of times stuff like that will happen that sort of indicates that now you're in a dream. So it's like an indicator as well, because it's more real. It doesn't make conscious sense, but there's something unconscious that it's signaling. So definitely it's purposeful, but I think it's just meant to be surreal and a dream indicator. Like, hey, we don't know it yet because we've only just started watching the movie and it's the first film, so we have no reference. But on hindsight, you'll see that's an indicator that we were in Tina's dream at that time.
Right. And I love how the movie opens with Tina's dream, where she's basically being chased by Freddy, who we've not yet met. And she wakes up and her nightgown is got 4 slash marks in it. And her mom gasps and is like, oh, you need to trim your nails. You're having nightmares again. You did that to yourself. I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, if I had like 6-inch slash marks in my nightgown, like, I would hope my mom would be a little bit more concerned, but neither here nor there.
Yeah. Mom's busy with her boy toy in the other room.
And it's so good that they have like the tropes, right? Like you have Nancy the virgin, you have Tina who's like the slut with her bad boy Rod boyfriend, and then you have Johnny the jock or whatever. But they kind of subvert them.
The virgin too in a lot of ways, and the Tina's boyfriend is more the whore as well. So you have like a male counterpart. Too.
That's true. I didn't even think about that. Right. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, like the how they had that 360-degree like moving set where Tina's death is filmed. Like that's one of the most brutal and terrifying. And you have to remember, like these kids are supposedly 15. Like a 15-year-old girl is getting brutalized in this way, and it's like I think we take it for granted, but it's I say extraordinary not because it's a good thing, but I say its impact is extraordinary, and I think we like for granted. And when she's getting cut and Rod is just there hopeless, and he gets the murder gets pinned on him because he was in the room, and nobody's gonna believe it's Freddy. I mean, it's just magnificent.
Blame the dark-skinned guy.
Right? Yeah. And he's not even dark-skinned, but yeah, like the closest thing.
But yeah.
Yeah, the ethnic guy. And even in the documentary, Robert Englund talks about, and this really just kind of, like took my breath away because I already love Robert Englund and now I love him even more, but he was just talking about how Freddy is a metaphysical monster and that had never been seen on screen before. He's not contained by space or time like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees is. Like he can penetrate, and I'm using that word purposefully, like he can penetrate thresholds, right? And Robert Englund goes on to say that, like, they show him in this first film in bed with these 15-year-old girls and in their dreams. And Robert Englund says that's more of a violation than rape. And I think he's like, I think he's spot on in terms of like how it translates on film. Like it's so crazy that we take for granted that this is a pedophile. It's the pedophile we all love to love, and it's just insane how they've made the villain, the ultimate villain, somebody that you root for and love. It's how Wes Craven did it, I don't know.
Right, and I was just thinking that earlier, like actually when we first started filming, about how how insane that so many people like almost root for a pedophile. The narrative of this particular series, where they would never outside of this series. And it's complicated. It has a lot to do with his charm and how everything is positioned. but it's almost cool to root for the villain. I've always like been more interested in the villain in so many stories, but yes, so they played that down actually. So originally they were supposed to be explicitly mentioned that he was a pedophile. It never is mentioned in the film, and even in the TV series they sidestep it a little bit. But originally that was specifically the idea, is that he had also molested and killed the children. So like the ultimate worst thing, in my opinion, and in most people's opinion, that you could do. Yeah, so but they really soft pedal on those things. They never say what he did to the children.
Right.
Yeah, so you really see him going after teenagers here. But every backstory, and we get a little backstory in Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare, which is nightmare number 6. And any backstory is shown smaller children, not teenagers. But
Right.
still, of these movies were teenagers going to the movies to see these. So it really, you could put yourself in their shoes. It would teenagers always in films. But the backstory was very much small children, and that's terrifying.
It is, and I think what makes it more terrifying and smarter on the filmmakers' parts, even the filmmakers that did some of the later, lesser movies, if you will, is the implication is scary. Just like with anything, like with Xenomorph, like the implication of what is there, what you can't see, is always scarier. So like not explicitly saying that Freddy's a pedophile, but I mean, you're getting major pedophile vibes, through everything, especially now looking back, and you have all these like supplementary things that are part of the canon to reinforce that. I mean, it's deeply, deeply terrifying. And the reason why I'm so fascinated by him and so in love with him as a character is because it forces you to ask, like, how are we so in love and charmed by like literally what everyone agrees is the worst thing a human being can be, and here he is, and he's endearing, and it's just it's masterful storytelling. I love it.
Well, it kind of goes to show you the whole age-old debate that usually older Republicans are forcing on our culture, which is that video games and films perpetuate violence. Well, you really don't have any evidence that this series endeared us in any way to child killers or to pedophiles. Everyone is just as disgusted by those things, outside of this film series and in their day-to-day lives as they would always be. It's never made a positive impact in that way, know. So it kind of chalks one up to no, it's more your values as a person than what films and video games are showing you. Those are just
agreed
escapism and entertainment.
Agreed.
I always agree more on that side of it.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I think the effect of violence in film and video games can affect cisgendered boys differently than they might affect cisgendered females. And I think we're seeing maybe a little bit of that in current events, but all of, not all of that aside, but I think generally speaking, if you're given context for what you're viewing, like my mother did for me, which is like, Freddy's not real, that's ketchup, it's not real blood, he can't really get you, then I knew how to separate. Whereas my friends who weren't allowed to watch these movies, when they finally saw them, they would have nightmares because their parents forbade them. There was a taboo, and then there was also no explanation and context for this is make-believe. So yeah.
Right, and those are great points. And I think it is important to also acknowledge that no one really grows up on a diet of only Freddy Krueger, hopefully, or only, the violent video game. So you have context. It's all about context, I think.
Right. Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
I would just argue that everyone has at least some degree of context in which to put these things. because how can you only be exposed to violent content from a newborn on? I mean, you're not. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, well said. Take me to church. There's just a couple more things like on the symbology and mythology I wanted to hit on. Is there anything else that's coming up for you? Or
No, but I was hoping you would go this way because you're so great in this area, and I think that this material is so rich for that discussion. So take us to church.
But there's also just like one thing I totally forgot about that's just like ridiculous. But when Nancy's mom takes her to like the sleep clinic, because she's just like, I need my child to sleep, and they hook her up to like the EKGs and whatever, and they're gonna monitor her while she sleeps. The little like office behind the window or whatever, there's like one of those like cheesy posters, and it says it's like one of those like the kitten that's like hanging in there, like it's just hanging on the wall, and it's just so ridiculous. But they do talk to I mean, we all know like insomnia will kill you, like extended insomnia will kill you.
Yes.
And even in the movie they say if you don't dream you'll go crazy. Like sleep and dreams are necessary to like being healthy, and Freddy is exploiting all of that. You see Nancy's hair go gray because she's so stressed and she's trying to save her friends. And they even talk about that in the documentary. Heather Langenkamp says that Nancy can only ultimately save herself because she watches her friends and everyone around her die throughout the entire franchise. So I thought that was pretty profound.
It's almost as if like he's inescapable, because you can only prolong sleep so much before you have to have it. And I think they're drawing a parallel between things in real life that feel inescapable. Whereas we know people can't haunt you in your dreams as much as we know so far in real life.
Right.
People can't haunt you in your dreams, but other things in life do feel inescapable. Whether it's someone that you have to have in your life for whatever reason, or is forcing themselves in your life that you can't get rid of, which I think we'll get more into with Perfect Blue when we talk about like stalkers and things like that. But there's so many metaphors for this, but I think definitely the film is using dreams as a way to make him something that you can't just skip town to get away from, right? You can't just you just can't get away from this guy, because it's inevitable that if you don't fall asleep and he gets you that way, then you die from no sleep. So either way, you're dead.
And as much as you can't kill Michael Myers, and as much as you can't seem to kill Jason Voorhees, like imagine also them being in your dreams and trying to kill you. Like it's
right.
If Freddy's on another level. In the documentary. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just wholeheartedly agreeing with that.
In the documentary, and this is pretty much like the last two things I wanted to bring up is in the movie you have what I consider to be one of the most, dare I say, iconic scenes, but also one of the most like kind of maybe underrated or glossed over moments is where you have Lin Shaye, who is an actress. Again, you've seen her in a lot of things, drama and comedy. She plays teacher. And so you have this scene in the maybe second act of the film where Nancy already knows what's going on. She's trying to stay awake. She's in class. She falls asleep in class, but before she does, you have the teacher reciting, and I have it pulled up, a quote from Hamlet. And I never really paid attention to this until I did the homework for this, but it's a dialogue between Hamlet and Rosencrantz, and the teacher's reading this aloud to the students. She says, the line is, where is it? "Oh God, I could be banded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space were it not that I have bad dreams." And in the documentary, they interview the actor that played the kid that was reciting that at the front of the class, and how Wes Craven said, okay, now do it again, but do it silently. So
In a
when
stage
she
with-
goes into, yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant directing. It's brilliant filmmaking. I mean, to have a Shakespearean reference in Nightmare on Elm Street, and like people don't even realize maybe that it's there. It's so good. It's so good. And the teacher says what is seen is not always what is real. I mean, take me to church. And then, you know, Nancy is fully asleep right now in the middle of class, and she gets out of her desk and she goes into the hall, and the hall monitor is there, but she's really Freddy. And she says, "Where's your hall pass?" in Freddy's voice. And Heather Langenkamp is like, "Screw your pass." And they interview the girl that plays the hall monitor in the documentary, and it's so great. It's so funny and silly, but also like deeply terrifying, that like these normal moments of just like leaving class to go to the bathroom, and then she sees dead Tina being dragged through the halls of the school in a body bag.
That's such a good sequence, and it is terrifying. The imagery, there's something innately terrifying about someone totally different voice coming out of someone more familiar. So when the hall monitor says in Freddy's voice and holds up the glove, but it's still her, it's just like this great persona play. And I just love that. And I love the imagery of Tina in the body bag, because that is so horrific. And the way like her hand flops and then they drag her.
And it's being dragged by an invisible, you can't see who's dragging her. It's just being dragged.
Right. I love that imagery. Such good imagery, along with him coming out of the wall. It's like, how did they think up all of this and they put so much into one work? And wow. And I would be so remiss if I did not mention the scene where, as an atheist, if I did not mention the scene where Tina says God when she encounters Freddy in the alleyway, which was filmed in Venice Beach, California, alleyways. And he holds up his gloved hand and says, "This is God."
It is literally the most erotic moment. Okay.
It's so great, and it's so like, fuck your religion, like fuck your God. It's like such a great like moment for me, like with religion film. It's just like God has no power here.
Right. And both Tina and Nancy have crucifixes in their bedrooms, and you constantly have this tug of war between like
good and evil,
their God and this new God. And when Freddy says this is God, I mean, I was taken to church, and it's everything. And you know, speaking of the glove, just one more thing on the body bag, that the actress that plays Tina, when she's being interviewed in the documentary, talks about how you have to remember that a body bag can only be open from the outside. So when you're in a body bag, imagine like being at the mercy of the people that can open or close it for you. Like you are literally in a coffin, in a matter of speaking, and just the psychological terror of being alive inside of a body bag.
And not having like airflow, because you can't get a lot of air in a plastic bag.
It's terrifying. It's all terrifying.
That actress is Amanda Weiss.
Okay, thank you. But speaking of the glove and God, nails. Let's talk about the nails for a second. Nails on the pipes. Throughout the franchise, we've got a lot of nails on chalkboard moments. The stitching of the nails, the sparks that fly. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I love it. There's so much great imagery. Like this whole series, and even extending into the TV show, we said is more hit or miss, is so rich, imaginative and interesting imagery in the way that a lot of other series are maybe lacking. So props to all of the creators for that. I mean, it seems endless. Like it's as limitless as the imagination, really.
It really is, and I think that's why they were able to. Because I mean, all three of the main guys, Mike, Jason, and Freddy, all have fran 7 or 8 movies ish, if not more. I mean, Halloween's still going strong too, but um, I think you can milk Nightmare so much more.
Right.
And we talked about in other movie hours and then also offline about what it would be like to have a really serious filmmaker, director come in and handle something you love so much. Like, what would it be like if somebody like Ari Aster, like, this new blood got their hands on Freddy? It would be amazing.
Yes.
Like, really get there.
Well, Freddy is one of those that really hasn't had a proper resurgence. We had Freddy vs. Jason, which I just thought was just not interesting, and I just thought it was silly, and it was so like early 2000s in a way. But like, Halloween's had some pretty good comeback movies recently, and Freddy has not had that yet. So maybe we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I hope so. The only other thing I wanted to mention is my favorite scene in the whole movie, and that, well, before I say that, I want to say one other thing that's, I feel like, iconic, but also like masterful filmmaking, and I'm sure they go into more depth on this in the documentary, but when Johnny Depp's character Johnny gets killed, like that whole scene where he gets sucked into his bed, and then like he sinks into his bed, and then the blood goes against gravity and like shoots up. Like, it's beautiful.
Right. And that's such a good sequence. And they said in the documentary, they showed the extended version of it where he is spit back out by the bed, which I think is like funny and interesting, and they should have left it in. But they just were like, the scene is done. We'll just cut that end part. But I think that would have been great to leave in, actually. And so Johnny Depp plays Glenn in the film.
Glenn.
Yeah.
I thought he was playing Johnny for some reason. I don't know where I got that from.
There is a film similar, and I can't recall what it is, where the actor plays their namesake. Even in this series, yes. So in 4 or 5, there's an actor that they have play his own name. But
okay.
In this,
yeah, I don't know why I got turned around.
Yep.
But my favorite scene of the movie, and circling back to what Robert Englund says in the documentary about how much of a violation of space, and just how much of a violator Freddy Krueger is towards women specifically, is the bathtub scene. Okay, so my favorite part of the whole movie is the bathtub scene where you have Nancy, like, in her ultimate vulnerable state. She's finally taking a moment to relax. She thinks mom is going to keep her awake. She ultimately ends up falling asleep in the bathtub, and then the, dare I say, iconic shot of God, the claw, the glove coming up, the knives coming up in between her legs. I can't tell you like how beautiful and smart and just terrifying and well thought out, and just how timeless that imagery is of just like a woman, legs spread, most vulnerable, and then you have the male, specifically an abuser of children and women, like that hand right there.
Yeah. I wonder if I know, it's amazing. First of all, I love when the mom knocks on the door and she's like, "Do you want some more milk?" And then Nancy's like, "Warm milk? Gross." Like, it's
right.
like mom.
Like, I'm not 5.
Yeah, it's such a mom moment. And yeah, that is great.
So cool.
Milk, like, get out of here. Go and hit the bottle. But anyway,
right.
I love when they're arguing in the kitchen and Nancy grabs her bottle and she's like, that's when she says screw sleep, but she like slams the bottle on the floor of the kitchen. And because she's so aggravated because she's not getting what she wants from her mom. But yes,
Right.
back to the bathtub. That's such an iconic sequence. We're gonna say iconic a lot because we like iconic things. So deal with it. But
Until they the better adjective, we're gonna use it.
well, I'll get on that. I'll look up some adjectives. But I'll get my thesaurus out later. But yeah, it's so great. It is really great.
That's also the first time we hear I'm not going to say it, the song. I was going to insert my favorite adjective, but that's the first time we hear 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, is when Nancy is in the bathtub and she's making it up, I guess. I don't know, but she sings the song that we all know and love. And yeah, I mean,
wow.
Just everything in this movie
really,
is just perfect.
And I don't know if it's that we were young when we saw it, but you really put yourself in her shoes. And I would wonder, like, if someone who was much older, if they saw it, if they would have that same experience with this film. But we saw it when we were young, and even if you're younger than a teenager, you aspire to, you think teenagers are the coolest things. So you aspire to put yourself in the shoes of a teenager.
Until you know better.
Right. Exactly. But then, a lot of teenagers were watching this movie. But yeah, it's so amazing.
And it's interesting, if I may get meta for 1 second. At one point, it's never said in the movie, but we know early on when in the first act of the film, the kids, like, Tina, you get it, the foursome, they're talking about
Tina,
it's the first
other one. Rod.
Yeah.
Tina,
it's
Rod,
the first,
Tina, Glenn.
Okay, Tina, Rod, Glenn, and Nancy, right?
Yes.
Okay. Not Johnny Glenn. When they first are realizing that they're all having the same dream, and the idea that, like, dreams can be shared is something that science has proven can happen. And it's also speaks to, like, the breaking of the fourth wall, right? Like, you're talking about how we have this shared kind of nostalgia around these certain films and specific moments in said films, and that's almost a shared dream too, because it's like, if somebody were to watch it for the first time today, would they have that same, like, connection with the material? And I don't know, but it's very, it can be read as meta, because the narrative has become so much part of the zeitgeist and popular culture that we all share memories of these films and of the characters, and that's what the movie's all about in a lot of ways,
Right.
And you have there's a fight scene at the end where they go toe to toe, and she whoops his ass, and she brings him out of the dream world into the real world where he can be hurt, and she thinks that she's killed him after a really cheesy booby trap filled fight scene. I love that she did booby traps. Like, that was great. And can we talk about how useless Glenn is? Like, he's supposed to be babysitting her. That motherfucker fell asleep on the job. She has to do everything herself, Nancy. Poor Heather Langenkamp. But the ending scene of the movie, we think all is well. We think Freddy's dead. Everybody's going to school, and then they get in the car, and then the camera pans back, and you see that the convertible is canvassed in green and red. And then mom is, with her cup of coffee, which is, I'm sure, filled with vodka, waving bye to the kids, and then Freddy grabs her.
Yes. Hopefully she's reformed by then, because this is like the idyllic world with, like, the perfect sunlight, that they're awakening from the nightmare that is the experience of the whole Freddy story that we've just lived through. And it's like this perfect idyllic morning that they're having, and then of course she gets sucked through the window, which looks really cheesy now, but I still think the green and red on the convertible top is a nice touch. And then the real ending, as they explain in Never Sleep Again documentary, is when the camera pans and we see the little girls jump roping and singing all very misty, like blurred, and singing the jump rope song, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. So, what's so great is that they set this story up to be so rich in like mythology and metaphor and possibility of imagery that it's great that we got so many films and you know the TV show and a bunch of other things after this film, because that they have so much territory to explore.
Yes. Yeah. And I just love how it ends on a note of you don't know if you're dreaming or sleeping or what's real and what's not. And you know, when they cut to the little girls in all white jump roping in this innocent moment, but they're singing the one song. It's just
it's all such great imagery, and it can be mined by those subsequent films without feeling repetitive, because like you welcome it back, but they also put their different twists on it, which is which we'll explore like film by film, because we'll do all the films, and we should.
Yes, we're taking you with us, willingly or not. We're going to deep dive all of it. Any final thoughts? Anything else that we need to say about the pedophile that we all love to love? I mean, let's just call it what it is, you know?
It's so interesting. I don't know. No, that's pretty much it. That's all I have. And it's one other thing I was going to mention that I didn't mention was that Tina in this film is set up to be almost like the heroine, the female hero, who is going to be the main character, because we open with her. So we're familiarized with her first, and then she's killed. And then Wes Craven, of course, Alfred Hitchcock did this in Psycho, where the lead female character is killed in the shower. Very in the film when you're not expecting it, because you're expecting they wouldn't kill the lead character, would they? And it's just like, great, pull the rug out from under you. And then Wes Craven did it again in Scream with Drew Barrymore, where we think Drew is the star of the show because she's a big name actress. They wouldn't kill her off and then kill her off. So I knew that about Scream because Drew Barrymore was a celebrity. So you didn't expect her to get killed right away. Have it be this like opening cameo. But I never made the connection back to Tina in Nightmare.
Yeah, I wouldn't have either. I'm glad you brought that up, because you're spot on. I mean, the two opening sequences are first of Freddy building his glove, and then it cuts to Tina's dream, and cuts to her waking up with her nightgown shredded. And so you're like, okay, this is our protagonist, and then no, it's brilliant. Yeah, not misdirection, but it's subverting your expectations like every step of the way.
Totally, and I think that Scream's a little cheesy now, like when you watch it, but at the time, like it was really smart. And I mean, I don't know how well it's aged. I'd have to go back and watch it again, but it's very 90s. But I mean, maybe more so than Nightmare is 80s. I don't know. They're both of their time. But
to me. Sorry, go ahead.
In Scream, he's very meta, right? Like very meta. So you even have Drew Barrymore referencing like Nightmare on Elm Street, and you have like the
and Jason and other slasher movies. Yeah.
And the nerds that work in the video store that pick apart all the slasher films and the rules of slasher films, and they play with that. You know, I'll be right back. Like, don't say I'll be right back, because you won't be back.
Don't have sex either. If you want to live, you can't have sex.
Of that.
Virgin.
Definitely.
I personally think, I mean, Scream came out when I was maybe a senior, like 98, I think 99 maybe Scream came out. I don't know, but maybe a little bit before that. I don't know. You can correct me. I'm probably way off. It's been a long time, but
I'm gonna check. I'm gonna look it up.
Maybe I was like 10th grade. I don't know.
96.
I personally think, oh, it is? Okay. I think Scream is a masterpiece, and of course it's dated now, but I think, like, fuck the sequels. Scream, to me, is a masterful, like, for a director and a creator and a storyteller to be able to have, like, 2 decades worth of mythology follow him, and then other people try and copy him, and whatever, and to be able to go back and comment on it and make fun of it, but also laud it at the same time. Like, I think Scream is a masterpiece. There's nothing about Scream I don't like, not a single thing.
Yeah, and I like the cast too, definitely. So he's gone on to do great work. I mean, we talk about a lot of directors on our movie hours, and we talk about their bodies of work, and it's just interesting I think the true test of a good director is how well they perform over any given time, and they don't have to have like a lifetime of great work if they don't want to, but to show that you can kind of that it's not like that lightning can strike twice, so to speak, is I think the true mark of like a really great director, and I think Wes has proven himself, definitely.
Yes. And may he rest in peace, and so grateful for everything that he's given us. Like, I mean, Nightmare is probably what he's most known for, but
yeah, I love listening to him. If you watch a lot of his interviews, which we have in the documentary and on the behind the scenes, I've just seen like hours of interviews with him, and he is captivating to watch, to listen to.
Yeah, I am so ready for part 2, because it's my favorite of the franchise, followed by part 6. Freddy's Dead, and I can't wait to reminisce about having seen that in the theater with 3D glasses. But yeah, I love this character, and it's so interesting, again, not to sound like a broken record, but that somebody so vile can be so lovable, and like to unpack that as a conversation is just like a gift that I think Wes Craven gave people. And yeah, I love Freddy. I love him. And final thoughts before we see these people on the other side?
I say wrap us up.
All right, y'all. Well, fasten your seatbelts, because it's going to be another saga. We have 6 more films to do with Fred, and yeah, stay tuned for part 2, because Chad's got some show and tells, and we'll link everything referenced in the description box. And yeah, check out our other movie hours. Like, subscribe, comment, you know the drill. And cheers. We will see you on the other side. Bye.
See you on the other side.